FIRE, or the Financial Independence Retire Early movement, has become really popular over the last 10 or definitely 20 years, and I think there's some obvious reasons for why that is. It totally promotes having independence and freedom around what you get to do with your time earlier on in your life rather than once you're 65 years old, which might be considered the typical retirement age. The FIRE movement also promotes some very fiscally responsible habits that I think a lot of people in the United States and globally could really stand to learn from. At a very general level, FIRE basically involves spending as little money as possible now so that you can save as much money as you possibly can, so that in a relatively short period of time, typically 10 to 20 years, you can save up enough money in after-tax investment accounts that you'll be able to access before your actually retirement age, which in the United States is 59 and a half, so that you can live off of that money and retire early. There are many misconceptions, though, about what FIRE actually looks like for those living that life, and many risks that are not covered by people who actively promote the FIRE lifestyle. And those risks come from the mathematical realities of retiring like 50 or 60 years before you're going to die, because that's a 50 or 60 year period of time that you need to be able to fund your living expenses for. But similar to most retirement scenarios, because you're just living off of sum of money that you've been able to save up and invest, but it's different from other retirement scenarios because it does not include Social Security or pension income, again, because you're too young of an age, and most people nowadays don't have pensions from their employers anyway. Just from a dollars and cents perspective, people practicing FIRE are disadvantaged from people taking a regular retirement path in like 3 ways. Number one, the most important, is the timing, but also they don't have other guaranteed sources of income. They really need to rely on the investment accounts that they've saved up, unless they have real estate that they're drawing some monthly income from, or they're still working part-time, in which case they're not really fully retired, they're kind of semi-FIRE. But again, I am a fan of the frugality that the FIRE lifestyle preaches on. You really aren't going to be that much happier by buying yourself more or more expensive things. So when you can find that balance and be content with yourself while living off of a lower budget, it allows you to save more money for your future. And I think that's in general a good thing. But back to that mathematical reality, FIRE almost always necessitates that you also live an extremely frugal lifestyle while you're retired. And again, that would be for the majority of your life, like 50 or 60 years. And that isn't necessarily all that appealing to people who really sit down and consider this. With FIRE, there are basically 2 options. You either have a really high income now, but you save the majority of it to the point where you're living at a really low income or just above the poverty level, so that you can live at a regular standard of living throughout your retirement. Or if you're not in the top 1% of income now, you save still a huge portion of what you have to put yourself living just above the poverty level or at the poverty level again, but that's still going to leave you with living at a low income level or just above the poverty level throughout your entire retirement. And sure, theoretically, someone could use FIRE and not have to live at a low income lifestyle or just above a poverty level either at now during their retirement, but you'd have to be at the really upper echelon of income levels. In retirement, to have a budget of about $60,000 of after-tax annual income, you need somewhere around $1.7 or $1.8 million saved up in your investment account. And to save up $1.7 million from, say, ages 20 to 35, you need to be putting away about $75,000 a year and earning an okay investment return on that. So again, even if you're able to budget 75% of your income towards retirement savings, that means you need to be earning $100,000 per year on average throughout your 20s to be able to fund this. And to be earning an average of about $100,000 per year throughout your 20s would put you in about the top 1% of income earners. And the reality is that that's just not going to be an option for every person who might like to pursue FIRE. And then this part's just my personal opinion, but I would guess that of the people who are earning the top 1% of income brackets throughout their 20s and early 30s, the vast majority of them are not going to be interested in FIRE at all, because they're probably very hardworking, very motivated, and very successful people. And typically, in my experience, people in that demographic got there for a reason. They're very hardworking and motivated people in general, and they want to pursue continued success in their careers, so they're not going to be interested in calling it quits when they're 32. So if you consider the math and that FIRE would only be, as it is presented, very fiscally possible for the top 1% of earners, and then say, well, 99% of those 1% earners aren't going to want to pursue this anyway, I think there are very, very few people out there who will actually utilize FIRE the way it's presented to most people. And this sort of false reality is the reason that a lot of really prominent financial talking heads and famous financial advisors, Susie Orman's a good example, have spoken out against the FIRE movement. I think Susie said, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. You'd have to have $5 million to do this responsibly at age 35 or 40 or whatever age she was talking about. Susie said, well, it's really fiscally irresponsible. People pursuing FIRE are, in her opinion, also just trying to escape the traumas that growing older can bring, and you're still going to to face those realities even if you're not working. Of course, there's been a bunch of pushback from people in the FIRE movement saying that she doesn't get it. FIRE is all about getting out from underneath the man and earning back your own freedom, which again, I totally understand. Any initiative that is pro personal freedom and taking control of your own life and your own time, I'm generally a fan of. I just think this one is not what people expect it is going to be when they potentially start pursuing this. Another issue that a lot of people will point out with the FIRE movements is that it almost never allows you to have kids. You're not going to have an employer-funded health insurance plan if you're no longer working when you're 35, and you're not going to have a lot of disposable income. We already talked about those low income or poverty level things. So it almost totally gets rid of that option for your life. And for a lot of people, once they're in their 30s is when they'll decide that they want to have kids. So they've really pigeonholed themselves into a lifestyle throughout their 20s and making these decisions. And then if you retire when you're 34 and decide you want to have kids when you're 36, well, now you can't because of these financial moves you made, and you really can't afford to have kids. So from that perspective, you're actually less free in being able to do what you want to do in the future. Another knock, and this one I can really get behind, is that a lot of the people who are preaching about successfully practicing a FIRE lifestyle and not working anymore.
Today, we are here to tell you that we are financially independent and have retired early.
They're also earning pretty substantial incomes from blogs or partnerships or their Etsy store, YouTube channels, Instagram pages, traveling the world, things like this. So it's not super realistic for everyone to assume that they're just living off of the $40,000 a year that they can draw from their money that they've saved up. They also have good supplemental income coming in that they might not be telling you about. And so anyone who's promoting a financial practice with a real lack of transparency around how that financial practice is actually working for them is something to be skeptical about. It's something to spend much more time doing research into to figure out how realistic it could be for you. I also just think there's something to be said about having too much time if you were to retire at age 35. I think as human beings, psychologically, we are built to want to pursue and grow in certain fields. And so to call it quits from a profession that you're probably pretty good at if you've been able to earn enough money to put away enough to be able to retire early is going to leave you lacking some meaning and purpose. And I get it, it's super enjoyable to spend a week on vacation with friends or to travel and go to different places, but all your friends are still going to be working. So at least for the 5 weekdays, you're going to have absolutely no one to hang out with unless you have a spouse, but you could get bored of hanging out with your spouse for 16 hours a day. Realistically, you're either going to be like watching TV, jogging, or reading a book. I mean, there aren't all that many more things to do when there's no one else around. The reality of a FIRE lifestyle is going to be very antisocial. There aren't going to be opportunities to do many social things because, again, everyone else your age and in your circles are still working. Maybe your family, aunts and uncles, grandparents, parents are retired around this time, and so it'd certainly be nice to get to spend more time with them, especially if you do have kids and are somehow funding your kids' growth on a poverty level income. Your parents, their grandparents, would really enjoy to spend extra time with them, but it's not something you're going to want to do for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just not realistic, I think, for a lot of people to think that they're going to be able to fill their days with things that they enjoy doing if they were to retire at age 35. Maybe I'm missing something here. If you're someone who is pursuing FIRE or maybe already retired using FIRE, let me know down below if you disagree with some of the negative points I've made throughout this video. If you've gotten to this point, it means that you watched the whole thing, and I very much appreciate that. The YouTube algorithm loves long watch times in terms of total minutes watched and just as a percentage of the video. If you could also like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done those already, I very much appreciate those as well. Check out some of my promotional stuff in the description down below if you want to support me there. As always, thanks for watching.